Hello. Once again, this is Majunda This is for episode 2 of Majunda Minute. It's been a while, and I've been meaning to record another episode. It's just I have recently become both more productive and less productive, like in a short period of time, because I'm working 2 jobs, and I like those 2 jobs. But when I'm not working, I have no motivation, and that's not good for someone who has a lot of ambitions. But I'm not going to really be focusing on my personal life. I wanted to record a new episode because there's some information, and also I asked for some topic ideas. Also, apologies on any background noises you may hear. It is still incredibly hot where I am, and I have to have the fan on, like, nearby, just because this room is very hot. So I'm going to be talking about a few things. Going to be just pulling some random topics out of this little suggestions I had gotten on Instagram that I had asked. But first, before I get into that, I'm going to talk about some recent news. 2.9 is, like I discussed like a week ago, is around the corner. Recently today, more or less, Ludia gave some information to some YouTubers and just more or less general Jurassic World Live influencers about the upcoming update and what it's going to be introducing. There's going to be 4 new creatures, and 2 of them are completely, they're part of this new class, more or less. They're going to be small flyers, and as far as we can tell, both of them, 2 of the new ones are going to be flock creatures. And if you don't already know, spoilers ahead, it's going to be Siluros Oravis and Archaeopteryx, and then there's going to be 1 new common, 2 new rares, and a legendary. And the legendary, as far as I can tell, is for one of the new creatures. I'm fairly certain it's for the Siluros Oravis, because it has a hybrid in the code. And besides that, there's going to be, around 37 or so changes to a bunch of creatures. Most likely, these are going to be the resilient changes that have been circulating around. Mostly, it's probably going to be rebalances to a bunch of resilient creatures. Because since resilient abilities are going to be changed to use things like vulnerability instead of deceleration, they're going to have to do a good amount of rebalancing. So 37 changes is a lot, and on top of that, we're getting about 16 new moves or so. One of which is a healing counter, first of its kind, more or less. I mean, the Bajadasaurus boss has a healing counter, but it's very, very minuscule. But and that's all for in terms of like actual 2.9 news. It could be subject to change because these things are always subject to. I am a little disappointed with the number of creatures because I thought we were going to get more, because it's been a while since we've got a update with multiple creatures. Well, more than 10. Well, or 5 or whatever the standard number is. And it's been a while since we've gotten multiple like super hybrids. The last super hybrids we got was with the Scorpius update, but like I try to ignore them. So, and what this also means is that Indotaurus is probably not coming in the next update. I know some people were talking about some like supposed leaks, and if you saw them, then like I would, and I saw them, and I would suggest. What I think is that they don't look like, most of them don't look like what we already know is in the code. Like one of them kind of looks like Puratoris, but that's about it. And a bunch of them just look like Jurassic World the game models. So I'm assuming someone must have just piled into the code of Jurassic World the game and pulled out some of their models, because one of them is just the Magistocurus hybrid from Jurassic World the game, not the recent one that was added. I see this update as a relatively small one. I mean, sure, 37 changes and like pretty major balancing changes is pretty big, but in terms of like actual new content, there's not much. We're getting 4 new creatures, which is like kind of an all-time low. What was the lowest amount? I think the lowest amount of creatures we ever got was back with Dakotonops and like it was Dakota Raptor and Gorgonops and Dakota Raptor. Like I can't exactly remember, but I remember the lowest amount of hybrids we got in one update, or creatures we got in one update was 3. So I say 2.9 is kind of a smaller update. I mean, probably they're preparing something pretty big for 3.0, because that's a pretty big number, and it's been like pretty interesting. If any of you have like been around for like since 2.9 has been out, I think it's been at least a year now since 2.0 came out. Because I remember it way before the pandemic even came around, and I like using the pandemic as a bit of a time determiner of like what is like old Jurassic World Life stuff and what is recent, because the pandemic certainly changed a lot in terms of like how the game was managed, but that's besides the point. So 2.9 is around the corner. We're getting patch notes this Friday, so keep your eyes out this Friday, and likely we're going to be getting the update itself on either Monday or Tuesday or even Wednesday, so of next week. So just keep an eye out. All right. Moving on, going to be picking some random topics from the suggestions I had gotten from my little suggestion poll. And what is an interesting one? Look at here. Look here. All right. Here's one. MLG Godzilla 422 asked what creatures need a hybrid, and well, basically, I'd say there is a large list of them. I've been compiling a larger list of them, and currently there are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26 creatures that currently lack hybrids. And considering they're going to be adding in a new hybrid, that'll be 27. So 27 creatures that will all lack super hybrids. And if we're talking about like a priority list, which it seems Ludia kind of follows, they kind of just do whatever they like, but if we're talking a priority list, I'd say older hybrids get the priority, so things like Alankylosaurus, Brontolasmus, Sungaea, Entelochops, Gryplicen, Keratoporcus, Insotherium, Phorosora, and more or less, and Dimodactylus, like an Aloraptor, and they get the priority because they're older hybrids. Alankylosaurus, especially Alankylosaurus, has been around for nearly 3 years now and has barely gotten any attention. And I feel it's about time. I mean, we already know they have an art for a hybrid, and it did get second place in the hybrid voting poll. So I assume it'll get a hybrid soon. Well, soon as in like next update, like 3.0 or maybe 3.1. Really depends. We'll have to see. Ludia works in mysterious ways, and they have somewhat of a priority list, but if we're talking about hybrids, I would personally like to see in the next the next update. Besides the ones that like are in the code, like the Andrew, whatever the Andrew hybrid is, because I really like Andrew Sarkis. My personal list of things that I would like to see um, hybrids for would be Andrew Therium, Andrew Tudon, Aquilomymus, Brontolasmus, Dicotonops, Dodocevia, Intellichops, Iramaceros, Erlicogama, Gryclocan, Inosotherium, Keratoporcus, Megalogaia, Magistochirus, Scutophocyon, Centomoth, and Velociraptors. Those are like the ones I'd like to see super hybrids for. But if we're talking like top priority, I would like to see Keratoporcus, Iramaceros, Intellichops, and Andrew Tudon get hybrids like soon. I like if you've been following me for a while. I typically do make my stance pretty clear on how I feel about the meta and how I feel. I'm very anti-meta. I use things that are not typically aren't even in high are typically very much below Apex or Tyrant or whatever. Because my current team consists of Smilonemes, Scunosaurus, Testicornibus, Pucandactylus, Antarctivinator, Carnotarchus, and Majunda Boa. And most of them, with the exclusion of Scunosaurus, are not Tyrant material. Most of them are below that. And my favorites are, Smilonemes and Testicornibus and Majunda Boa. But I have a much longer list of things I would like to start using and boosting. I currently have a very high level Ankylocticurus with some boosts. I want to continue working on that. Especially, I want to see how it's going to play after this rebalance. Entellilania, I like. Entellilania has it had a bit of a. It had a slight surge in use ever since its rebalance. With it, it's certainly much better than it was on release. But now, ever since everyone's discovered how absolutely busted Scunosaurus is, and it's probably better than both Gemini Titan and Ardentis Maxima, it's kind of flooded the arena as of recent, and I'm happy for it, but at the same time, I kind of hate that it's become super meta because I was using it before it became meta, So now I'm starting to sound like a whiny baby who's like, "Wah! I got it. I had it first." So yeah, but I'm happy for it because I like Cunning Resilience. They're my favorite class besides wild cards, and I'd like to see more, and hopefully we get to see some. That's mostly why I want to see Iramaceros is probably the one thing I want to see a hybrid for as soon as possible because I love Cunning Resilience. So let's talk about how about another topic? Which creatures need buffs and /nerfs and explain how? Gladly. This has been, quite the contentious topic as of recent, and I'll lay it out here just first. If there's a priority list of things that need to be changed right away, that would be Ceramagnus and Hadros Lux. Just baseline. Most people can agree they are too good. Ceramagnus especially. Ceramagnus is kind of in its own situation because I kind of hate things with swap-in Stunning Strike. I think as a move, any kind of swap-in move is kind of swap-in damaging move. We all remember the Scourge of Dracorex and Dracoceratops, with this dumb swap-in Shattering Rampage and then the swap-in Rampage. I think any kind of swap-in damage is a bad idea because it kind of makes battles kind of predictable. But also, when you're facing an opponent with a swap-in stunning creature, with any kind of swap-in attack creature, you have like no way to actually properly counter it, because typically they use it on creatures that are really close to death, but like the creature they were facing just did not have the strength to take them out. And I think it's a cheap, skillless tactic, is what I'm saying. I think if you use any form of swap-in stunning strike or swap-in damaging creature, you are not a skillful player. I think what you are relying on is a get out of jail free card, because they're supposed to. It's essentially just it props up a losing match. Like if the creature you currently have on the battlefield and the creature you're currently facing, like you've had a rough tumble, and like the other creature is very close to death, but like they have the speed advantage, or they have enough damage to survive they have enough health to survive whatever you're throwing at them. When you swap in like a creature, like it's more or less it's insurance that you won't lose a match. And I feel it's cheap. I kind of hate having my things that were clearly going to win just be shut down because someone has a level 30 Dracoceratops, or they have a Serra Magnus especially. If you want to know a reason why I run Majunda Boa to begin with, besides the fact that I like it, Majunda Boa is completely and entirely immune to any form of swap-in damage because of its on-escape Dust Cloud. And here's the thing, a lot of people in the arena don't know that. Nobody expects a Majunda Boa. Like, for the same reason nobody expects a Testacornubus or a Carnotarchus or any of the things I run, because they're so underutilized. I like being anti-meta because nobody expects it. And they think I am weak and defenseless, and sometimes I am. When it comes to things like Mortem Rex or Thorodolosaur or Modelometrodon. Things that are overabundant and overboosted, and I have basically no proper counter for. But I've gotten off topic. We're talking about things that need buffs and nerfs. Serra Magnus and Hadros Lux. The main issue with Serra Magnus is it's got too good of stats. It's got 4,500 HP, pretty standard high, pretty decent health. It's got 1,500 damage, 114 speed, 30% armor, and a 20% critical stat. For Resilient, that is absolutely absurd. And its main strength comes from the fact that its resistances are really good. It cannot be slowed, and it cannot be stunned, and it's got a slight vulnerability resistance. And its moveset isn't that great. It's got Resilient Strike, Group, Acceleration, Acute Stun, and Precise Rampage, and the previously mentioned Swap and Stunning Strike. What is generally the main issue with Serra Magnus is it's just too good in a 1v1. Especially since it's high damage and high health and high armor and an above average crit means that it has very few losing matchups. There's only two things I can really say are its counter, and that would be Antarctivinator, because it can easily nullify its speed up and can bypass its armor with its definite rampage, especially if it's paired with something like Revenge Ferocity or Vulnerability Impact. And then the other one is a sort of counter, and that's Thylacitator. But Thylacitator can easily be shut down just with a simple stun. So I would suggest, if you want Serra Magnus to be balanced, you've got to reduce one of these. You've got to reduce one or two of these stats. And my suggestion is if it's going to be a resilient, it should act like a resilient. And I would say bring its damage down to a much more reasonable level. I would suggest maybe putting it at like what, 1.200, 1.300 is kind of like 1,300 is kind of pushing it. That's in mono rhino territory, and mono rhino is annoying as it is. And then bring its critical chance much lower. Like, it does not deserve a 20% critical chance. Sure, it's an Apex, and they're like, and Apex is kind of, there's this big debate surrounding them and their balance of whether or not are they better than uniques. Yet, like, they're typically easier to collect because most people, like, you can easily unlock things like Mortem Rex, Sarah Magnus, and Hadros Lux by more or less mooching off of other people's work with, you don't need much in a Mortem Rex raid. You could run an Irritator, or a Triostronics, or basically a low-level Deoragosaur, stuff like that. And you could easily get what is one of the strongest creatures in the game. So I think there needs to be a certain, like, if the Apexes are supposed to be stronger than uniques, I don't think they should be, because they're clearly much easier to unlock. I think, especially since a lot of uniques require a lot of work to unlock, like, especially things like Trigosaurus or Smilonemes, where they have, like, almost entirely exclusive DNA, like, especially, like, things like Scunosaurus with its Soronosaurus. There should be better balance. I don't think Apexes should be better than uniques. I think they're kind of an intermediate between legendary and uniques. And yet they're all considered to be like endgame stuff that you need to have. Which, that's why I don't really participate in any raids, and that's why I have not unlocked any of the Apexes. Besides the fact that I'm lazy and I don't really want to go through the whole hassle of, assembling a bunch of people for a raid, and then figuring out a strategy, and then eventually losing, and then trying again, and all that. That's why I stick to what I know. And I think endgame creatures should still be uniques. I think Apexes should certainly have their strength, because they are a higher rarity, but I don't think that means they should automatically be better, because they are comparatively much easier to unlock compared to most endgame uniques. So, yeah, like I said for Sarah Magnus, like, just reduce some of its damage, reduce its crit chance, and then you've got a far more balanced creature. And maybe turn its speed decrease resistance into like instead of it being an immunity, turn it into a resistance, and maybe give it some other resistances, or don't give it any. Just, we'll have to see. Because I imagine Sarah Magnus will probably be touched in this next update, along with the next one I'm talking about, Hadros Lux. Hadros Lux is also incredibly busted just due to it's got high health, high damage, and it's got 2 back-to-back rampages. And here's the funny thing: do you guys know that Hadros Lux can pretty much beat Mortem Rex, just flat out? Because Mortem Rex has the highest damage in the game, but that does basically nothing when Hadros can basically two-shot it. That counter does a good amount of damage. So, Hadros Lux, I feel, needs to be toned down. It needs to better reflect a resilient. It does not need 1,500 damage. Now, if we're talking the rest of the Apexes are pretty good. Like, Gorgotrabax and Referantum. Like, Referantum hasn't been, no one's unlocked Referantum yet, but Gorgotrabax and Referantum are pretty good they appear to be pretty decent, cunnings with very obvious weaknesses, but they do their job well. Mortem Rex is in its interesting situation of, Mortem Rex is more or less balanced, except for one part, and that's the cleansing impact. I don't think Mortem Rex deserves to have something like that, just because it completely negates any kind of cunning matchup. Most cunnings don't have enough health to survive, have very low health, and considering Mortem Rex has the highest damage in the game, if it goes cleansing impact turn 1 and the cunning gets in a decent chunk of health, and with a distraction move, that whole distraction, being a counter to a fierce, is completely undone by the cleansing impact. So I think Mortem Rex needs to lose the cleansing impact. I'd say give it something else that's fierce, maybe give it give it Ferocious Strike, see how that works, or give it a move that just doesn't let it completely negate its own obvious counters. Because that's the main issue with a lot of the Apexes, is that they kind of blur the line of what class they're supposed to be. Because Sarah Magnus and Hadros Lux, they're classed as resilience, but more or less they should just be classed as beat the shit out of everything else class, because they have very little counters. But moving on, talking about things that aren't Apexes, how about some some uniques? Because I feel like there's some uniques that need some attention. Because I'm more for balancing, giving things a leg up rather than nerfing a bunch of things, because then everything's bad. I'd rather have everything be good. So, how about I'll talk about a personal favorite, Testacornibus. I love Testacornibus. It's underutilized. It has quite a few losing matchups, but Testacornibus is versatile. But here's one thing I think kind of holds it back, is the fact that is Devastation. Devastation, I kind of think Devastation doesn't really need to be on a 2-turn delay, because by the time Testacornibus gets to use it, it's probably already dead. And this goes for most of the things that have Devastation. Most of the things that have Devastation are typically resilient, but they just can't survive long enough to in order to use it. So I would suggest maybe giving maybe this is a weird idea. Maybe we could make Devastation into a revenge type move. On Revenge, you could use Devastation on turn 1 on Revenge. Wouldn't that be something? Or maybe I'd say reduce its cooldown to a turn or so, because if things like Definite Rampage and group decelerating rampage, defense shattering rampage, and basically every powerful rampage move can be used on turn 2. A move that only does 1 times more damage on creatures that typically have only around 1,000 base damage in general. I feel it's only fair. Another thing I'd like to see kind of make a return, or more or less change, is I'd like to see some moves that more or less better reflect some classes. I'd like to see there aren't really any cunning, resilient, standard moves. The only one I could really name is Camouflage. But Camouflage is more or less just a pure cunning move. But does anyone remember when Testacornibus had Distracting Shield? I loved that. I loved that it had it. I was a little bummed to see it go, but I like Testacornibus as it is now. But I'd like to see Distracting Shield and things like it make a comeback. Here's another thing that I feel needs attention. Compsognathus. I think Compsognathus is pretty good. It is Tyrant material. And I think, in general, flock creatures are very good. They have a lot of strengths and typically very little weaknesses, and that's just because the Absorb ability more or less negates any, makes them pretty much difficult to kill, and especially since all of them have some form of like way of healing themselves. So I would maybe like for Compsognathus and to an extent Dodocevia. I think Compsognathus doesn't really deserve to have the speed reduce resistance. Like, well, it shouldn't be immune to it. It's a cunning, right? Cunnings shouldn't be immune to what's supposed to counter them for the same reason why a resilient shouldn't be immune to shield breaking or armor piercing, or that a fierce should be resistant to distraction or crit reduction. I mean, there can be exceptions. There can certainly be exceptions because having exceptions makes the waters a lot more varied. But outside of that, we should at least try and adhere to what kind of balancing system we're trying to have. Does that make sense? Alright. In terms of what else? I'm not going to talk about Scorpius Rex because I think Scorpius Rex is fine. It's good. I haven't had much trouble for it, but maybe that's just because, who knows, maybe my team is just surprisingly it's just the perfect counter for Scorpius. Because especially things like Testicornibus and Smilonemes are pretty adept at taking out Scorpius. But moving on, how about some buffs? Here's some things. Some legendary super hybrids I would like to see get some attention. Pretty much both Giga Spikosaur and Notopada Titan are both kind of completely worthless in terms of both legendaries and super hybrids and resilience, because Giga Spikosaur doesn't have anything interesting going on for it. It has one multiplier, and its counterattack isn't very good. It has no resistances. And then Notopada Titan it's got okay stats. It's got a good amount of health and 40% armor, and that's pretty nice. But its damage is so lacking, and it only has one multiplier, and it's an impact and a very pitiful counter. So here's some of my suggestions. I remember a few weeks ago I had came up with an idea for both of them, and that was for Giga Spikosaur. I would like to see to better reflect its ancestry, but also giving it something more unique. I've changed its kit around to be Superior Vulnerability, Group Decelerating Impact, Revenge Rampage, Short Defense, Medium Counterattack, Swap in Defense, and On Escape Rampage, and then give it a speed 75% reduced speed resistance, and a 50% vulnerability, and a 50% distraction resistance. And then don't change any of its base stats, because its base stats are fine. And then there you go. You've got a far more interesting Resilient. And here's the thing: a lot of more things need to use On Escape Rampage. There's only one, and that's Titanoboa, and also Hydroboa to an extent. And then for Notopada Titan, I wanted to make it a little bit more interesting, so I gave it 50 more damage, so it'd have 1,050 base damage and a 20% critical chance. And also, its new abilities include Shielded Taunting Strike, Taunting Vulnerability, Group Decelerating Rampage, Group Invincibility, Minor Counterattack, Swap in Slow, and On Escape Dust Cloud, and its resistances stay the same. So now you've got a far more interesting Resilient, and it's got raid utility. Sure, its damage is kind of pitiful, but it can help out in a raid by decelerating the entire team, and it has plenty of taunts and group invincibility, and because I would like to see more things have it, On Escape Dust Cloud. And then finally, this is completely different. Spinotosuchus. Spinotosuchus is one of my old favorites, and I've been upset to see. I'm upset to see that it's been bad for majority of its existence. There was at once, believe it or not, a time a really long time ago when Spinotasuchus was considered like tyrant. I know that's hard to believe, but that was also back when, Stegodeus was king. So, I gave it a more interesting kit. I increased its damage up to 12,050, and I changed its general moves to be Group Cleansing Strike, Lethal Wound, Minor Swoop, Revenge Cunning Rampage, Swap and Distraction, No Escape, and it gains 100% resistance to speed reduction and swap prevention, and a 50% resistance to vulnerability. That's to both, and with those stats, it should better complement its, playstyle as a cunning fierce. More or less, its label is a pure fierce, but I'd say it's a fierce playing as a cunning. So I'd say why not just give it the ability to distract it, because critical impact doesn't really do much. And it gets the speed reduction, immunity, because Caprasuchus has it. Why not? And Spinotasuchus' stats more or less stay the same. Still has the low health, and the high speed, but so its weaknesses are still there, and a cunning could still very easily deal with Spinotasuchus, but now it's better built for countering things, because any resilient with above 1,000 damage could easily take out Spinotasuchus on turn 2, because most of them have pretty powerful rampages. So why not make it a little bit more viable? And I'd like to talk more about these, and I'll certainly do that for next episode. But I've been going on for about 30 minutes now, and I think it would probably be about time I stop this episode for now and call it a day. So if you guys enjoy this, then just let me know. I'm glad the first episode got a good amount of reception. I'm going to continue with it, if you could already tell. So I'll see you around. I'll try and record the new episode as soon as I can. See you around. I think when the patch notes come out, I'll do an episode reading them. So look forward to that. Alright, see you around.
That wasn't funny in the least. Why the fuck would somebody make that? That could have been so much funnier. Who did that bullshit?